Rain lashed across the windshield, every drop a reminder of how vacant my life had become. I clutched the wheel knuckle white, staring down the blurred highway. The dashboard flickered. Then, the sound of nothing. The engine died. My car slowed to a stop, rolling uselessly onto the shoulder of the road. I sat there, hands still locked in place, listening to nothing but the rhythm of the storm. My phone screen lit up. I knew exactly who I should call. My husband. He'd answer with his usual tone, detached, irritated, busy. I could already hear his voice in my head. Call a tow truck. I'm in a meeting. For years, I was just another item on his list, another responsibility to be taken care of between business calls and flight itineraries. There was no warmth, no love, just duty. And I had stayed. Because sometimes starting over was just too hard. I huffed sharply and began scrolling through my contacts. My thumb hovered over a name I hadn't thought about in months. I shouldn't have even considered it. Yet I did. Before I could talk myself out of it, a passing car's headlights illuminated a figure walking toward me. Tall, confident, familiar. My heart clenched. It was him. I wasn't ready for this. I lowered my window just enough to see his face. Older, sharper, different from the boy I'd last seen walking out of our house 2 years ago. "Are you okay?" he asked, steady, calm. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because at that moment, I knew this wasn't just a breakdown on the side of the road. This was the beginning of something I couldn't take back. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe as he stepped closer. Rain dripped from the bottom of his jacket, dampened his hair, but in his presence, steady, too steady. He wasn't a kid anymore. Wasn't a boy who would get on a bus and just up and leave. Yet there he stood looking at me now, and something in me drew tight. "I wasn't expecting to see you here," I said, my voice low, only somewhat audible over the rain. His eyes darted to my car. "Engine died?" I nodded. He blew out a breath, then moved without preamble, popping the hood. A flashlight cut through the darkness as he leaned in, hands working with practiced ease. I stood there, unable to look away from the quiet confidence in the movements. He'd changed. "Starter's gone," he finally said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Can't fix it here. We'll have to tow it." I hesitated. "I can call a service." "Don't," he interrupted, his gaze meeting mine. "I've got it." It was the way he said it, like it wasn't even a question, like he knew I needed help before I could admit it. I didn't argue, because for the first time in years I wasn't being brushed aside. I followed him to his truck. The rain fell harder as he opened the passenger door for me. I hesitated for only a second before stepping inside. As the door shut behind me, I realized something I hadn't let myself see before. This felt right, and that terrified me. The truck roared to life, its headlights cutting through the rain. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, trying to disregard the way my pulse quickened in the silence. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually on the gear shift, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to do this," I said finally, my voice softer than I intended. He didn't look at me. I know. That was it. No argument, no questions. Just certainty. I turned toward the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. It felt surreal sitting next to him again, 2 years apart. Yet something about this moment felt inevitable, like we had been heading toward it all along. "I heard you moved," I said, filling the quiet. He nodded. "Yeah, got my own place, works steady." "And your dad?" A silence. Then, "Same as always." I didn't press the issue. We both knew what that meant. The garage slid into view, its fluorescent lights strobing through the downpour. He pulled in smooth, killed the engine. Outside, the storm howled, but inside the cab, it was silent. Neither of us moved for a time. Then he turned to me, his face expressionless. "You should go inside. You'll be warmer there." I knew I should, but something in the air between us made it impossible to look away, because for the first time in years, I wasn't just someone's wife. I was seen. The smell of the garage was from oil and metal. Rain hitting the roof formed a hum to break the silence. He reached for a towel and ran it once across damp hair before carelessly casting it aside as if nothing fazed him. Yet the air bore weight, and things that had not been said charged between us. He squatted beside the car, peering at the engine, his concentration unbroken. I should have been watching him work, should have been thinking about my car, my husband, my life outside of this moment. But I wasn't. I was watching him. "Shouldn't take long," he said, his tone even. "You can wait inside if you want." I didn't budge. "I'm fine." He looked up then, his eyes catching mine. There was something in them, something I wasn't ready to name. Minutes passed, the rain hammering down. My heart was too loud in my chest, my pulse too unsteady. Then it happened. No hesitation, no second guessing, just a step forward, just the space between us disappearing. It was not premeditated. It was not slow. It was as if the gravity had waited for that very moment to let us fall into something we both had been neglecting for so long. And once it did, it could not be unwound. I should have pulled away. I should have said something, anything, to make this stop. But I didn't. Neither did he. The rain kept falling, the low hum of it breaking into the silence as we stood, close enough to hear each other breathe. I could still feel the weight of the moment pressing against my skin, the realization of what just happened seeping in. But instead of regret, something else was there, something terrifying and thrilling at once. He stepped back first, just a fraction of an inch, but it was enough to break whatever invisible force had been holding us there. His jaw tensed, his hands flexing like he was trying to anchor himself. "This shouldn't have happened," he said finally, his voice lower. I nodded. "I know." Neither of us moved. Outside, the rain slowed, the storm passing as suddenly as it came. But in here, inside, it wasn't over. I could feel it in my chest, the way my hands shook at my sides. He blew out hard, running a hand through damp hair. "You should go home." A warning, not a demand. And yet neither of us stirred toward the door. I swallowed hard. "Do you want me to?" His expression flickered, something unreadable passing through his eyes. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. "You know it doesn't matter what I want." The words hit harder than I expected. Because they were true. Whatever had happened here tonight, whatever this was, it didn't change reality. I still had a life waiting for me, a home, a husband. And yet, for the first time in years, I wasn't so sure if I wanted to go back to any of it. A sharp gust of wind rattled the garage door, snapping me back to the present. I needed to leave. Before I did something I couldn't take back. One foot moved toward the door, and before I'd even reached to grasp the door handle, his voice was that of a sigh. "I meant what I said," he said softly. Turning back, my voice came cool. "About what?" Holding mine evenly, "Sure. You should leave." It was not what I wanted to hear. Yet. Maybe it was what I needed. I nodded, hugging myself as my feet compelled me forward. The cold outside slapped me, but I hardly felt it. My mind was full, my heart unsteady. I reached my husband's car. The same car which had broken down on the side of the road just hours before. The same car that had led me here. And as I drove away, I looked back in my rearview mirror. He was still standing there, watching me go. And somehow, that was the most painful thing of all.